Welcome to Anime T23, where we dive deep into the most intriguing what-if scenarios in the anime universe. In today's episode, we explore a world where Naruto Uzumaki, the future hero of Konoha, to protect his brother. Join us as we uncover how Naruto's become Shinobi peeling. To protect his brother transforms into his greatest strength. What if Naruto parents died, and Naruto becomes Shinobi to protect his brother? Part 2. Chapter 6. Work in Progress. Naruto shuffled his feet nervously, his palms sweaty as he held Ryo's hand, waiting for someone to answer Kazuya's knocks. He heard the snuffling at the door before the handle turned, Hana appearing as the Haimaru puppies circled their feet, spending an extra few moments sniffing Ryo. Hana shooed them back into the house and waved the three boys in, Ryo immediately shaking off Naruto to track down Kiba. After the first few days of uncertainty and petty jabs, the pair had become very close very quickly, and now it was a common sight to see them bickering around the clan compound. Naruto was delighted his brother had made a firm friend and was more than happy to take the extra task of looking after Ryo off of Gigi's shoulders. The old man had enough going on, and the Inuzuka were kind to the young blonde, even if they were a bit rough around the edges. Naruto was still wary of the villagers as they continued to glare at Ryo on the streets, and the occasional attempt was made to harm him, usually by drunks. Each incident was resolved without too much trouble with the help of the Anbu, but Naruto could never forget the burning hatred in their eyes. His nerves showed no signs of budging when Hana led them to the large dining room, the table set for dinner. Tsume poked her head out from the kitchen, her sharp eyes looking over the pair. "Have a seat, boys," she barked. "The two pups are going to have a snack now, and dinner after we have a little talk." Naruto glanced at Kazuya as they sat in the first seats they could reach, his terrified expression matching his own. Naruto trusted the head of the Inuzuka clan, but she was the most intimidating person he had ever met. He was pretty sure he knew what this was about, too. They sat silently as Hana ran up to fetch the toddlers and situated them in the living room next door, within sight of the table. Tsume finished placing food on the table and sat, her daughter hurriedly joining her. Naruto noted the meat on the table far outweighed the vegetables, but he supposed they were a dog-based clan and dogs ate meat, and now he could see members of the clan with tails and fluffy ears, and he needed to stop thinking as Tsume began to speak. "I should congratulate you boys for skipping a year. When Hana told me a few days ago she was now a second year, you can imagine my surprise until all the pieces fell into place." Her eyes scanned their faces. "That's what all the training you did was for." The pair waited to see what she would do next. The academy teachers had been furious when they first found out about the whole plan, but by then it was too late and the results had been tallied and announced. All three had not only passed, but they were roughly in the middle of the rankings, though Naruto was only 2 places above last, so the sensei had to accept they had earned their place. They had chewed Naruto out the most, bringing up his arm and medical history every third sentence. Honestly, Naruto was still surprised they let him stay with the other two, considering his age and currently useless arm. Then the sensei had figured out it was them behind the pranks. The three could still hear the yelling in their ears 2 days later. Once Aiko-sensei and Hideki-sensei had calmed down about all the chaos they had created and the lies they had told, they admitted they were slightly impressed by the forethought and work that went into it. They even praised the forgery and thievery, because if they could accomplish something like this, then they would do well in their future stealth and sabotage lessons. Of course, if they pulled something like this on the sensei again, they would have detention until they were Chunin. Plus, they were stuck with cleaning duties until the end of the year. And Naruto had gotten another lecture from Yakushi-sensei when he had gone to get his arm checked. "Hana told me about all the hours at the library, the sparring and the chakra control you've been doing over the past month, teaching each other your strong points. The plan itself was crude, but worked. So tell me more," she grinned, taking a plate of sausages and dumping some on her plate, gesturing for the kids to do the same. Naruto, Kazuya and Hana hesitated for only a moment before tucking in, Naruto's new cast making it awkward to put things on his plate. He was bummed that he had to have another so soon after he had gotten rid of the old one, but that final hit in the test damaged the same pathways he'd messed up before. The plan was Kazuya's, and then me and Hana added to it, Naruto began, spearing a sausage with a chopstick. Kazuya took over as Tsume turned her gaze to him. Well, we were all bored with first year and second year, didn't seem all that hard, so I just thought let's do it, since I had overheard about the test a couple days before. So we figured since I was good with the books, Hana with taijutsu and Akka, Naruto with chakra control, between us we could do it. He finished, looking at Hana to continue. Naru-chan's the one who thought up the pranks and we all carried them out, she added. I already told you how we took the forms and a copy of Aiko-sensei's signature. You didn't say who did the forgery. That was me, Naruto answered, pausing in his battle with the meat. It took a week of practice to get it close enough, but we were lucky Hideki-sensei didn't look at it closely until after the results. Tsume looked thoughtful for a moment. And how old are you both? 5. 7. Her brows rose in surprise. So you two had already entered the academy early? The pair shared a look. I guess? Kazuya shrugged. For some reason Tsume couldn't pick up on, they seemed uncomfortable discussing it. She knew that they would have needed special permission to be able to enter before the minimal age, but she didn't know who had signed off for them to attend. Tsume watched them, guessing they weren't willing to talk about it any further, and decided to drop it for now. She was proud of her daughter and of the 2 boys she had gotten to know over the last month. They would talk when they were ready. So what kind of pranks did you pull? The pair relaxed at the question. Devious smirks growing on their faces as they began to regale the matriarch of their tales of mischief. 2 months later, the 3 boys walked into the weapons shop, calling out a greeting as they entered. It was a day off from the academy and their usual extra training, and they had promised Tenjiro they would help out with deliveries. Most of the training lately had been figuring out the red leg style from the book they borrowed. But they had hit a wall with it, ending up focusing on their target practice or chakra control or homework instead. Second year was much busier than first, but they preferred the fuller timetable, although Naruto was unable to spend as much time with Ryo as he had before. The toddler was happy at the Inuzuka compound, and Tenjiro even watched him from time to time, but Naruto reassured himself that he would see more of his little brother when they left the orphanage. The front desk came into view, and they spotted Tenjiro sealing wrapped packages into a scroll. The first time they had delivered packages for him, the man had asked if they were working with chakra yet. After learning about Naruto's sensing and ever-growing control, he had sat him down and showed him how to seal and unseal items from storage scrolls. Fortunately, it only required channeling small amounts of chakra through one hand, and the redhead picked it up within an hour, imitating the flow of chakra he sensed from the shopkeeper. Tenjiro promised to teach Kazuya once he had enough control. Walking up to him, the sound of crashing boxes from the back room shot through the store, and they heard the man swear before launching himself towards it. Coming up to stand at the desk and plonking Ryo on the counter, they watched him emerge from the doorway with a little girl in his arms. Sorry about that. Tenten's getting more curious every day, he chuckled. The twin-bunned girl in his arms didn't look that much younger than Naruto, and her brown eyes inspected them. "Two-chan, were they?" she asked, voice high and inquisitive. "The tall one is Rai Kazuya, and the short one, Uzumaki Naruto. The little fellow on the counter is Norio, Naruto's brother. The bigger 2 are in the academy and deliver some things for Two-chan." Tenjiro replied. Tenten looked thoughtful, her tiny features scrunched up in concentration. "But red one is too small to be in academy," she pointed out, unable to understand how this boy could already be in the academy when Two-chan said she had to wait a few more years. Tenjiro hesitated in answering his daughter. Personally, he agreed that Naruto was a bit young to be in the academy already, let alone being recently advanced to second year. He was good with chakra and all right with kunai, but the rest he wasn't that great. Sometimes, though, when he looked into those blue eyes, they didn't match the tiny body, the youthful face, the high, loud voice. He forgets this boy is only 2 years older than his daughter, the determination and wariness overpowering everything else. He forgets looking at the wide, twisted scar on his face that he could have only been his daughter's age when it happened. So he replies with the only explanation that fit, that pushed away the doubts. "He's a tough one," Tenjiro answers, the corners of his mouth quirking up as he heard Naruto mumbling about growth spurts. "Tenji-san? Is it okay if Ryo stays with you? Last time he almost fell into a river when we took our eyes off him for a second," Kazuya asks, a ghost of a shiver running down his back at the memory. The water had been freezing that day. Of course, Tenten doesn't get much chances to leave the shop nowadays with her mother busy in Suna, so it might be good for her to make a friend, the shopkeeper replied, putting down his daughter and picking up Ryo, resting him beside Tenten. As the pair looked at each other, Tenjiro handed Naruto the scrolls, and the boy shoved them into his bag. "By the way, nice to see you without a cast, Naruto," Tenjiro called as the boys headed out. "For now," he overheard Kazuya murmuring, watching Naruto jab the brunette in the side. The shopkeeper thought back to the many casts the redhead had been stuck with since he met them. Maybe there was a way to prevent it altogether. An idea started to piece itself together in his head, and he grabbed for a blank scroll and a brush, keeping one eye on the pair on the ground. Naruto and Kazuya made their way through the village, dropping off the packages as they went. They had somehow gotten onto the topic of fashion, and Naruto was making a case for the color orange. He didn't really understand why certain clothes and colors were preferred over others, as long as they did their job and didn't get in the way, right? Besides, orange is awesome. I mean, seriously, Aka-chan, you already have bright red hair, but together with orange, in some ways they kinda match because they're both warm colors, but still, they can see you in Kumo. I don't think anyone could see us from Kumo unless they had a dojutsu, but it still seems too far. I didn't mean, you know what I meant, stop laughing. Come on, Pinkubaka, orange is great. I will talk some sense into you eventually. Purple is useless in all situations though. Purple is a lovely color that can look good on anyone. So is orange. If you're blind, why not try a blue t-shirt instead, or black? Why not add glitter and put ribbons in your hair? Now you're just being petty. This debate continued until they were interrupted by loud shouting coming from the training ground they were passing. The two looked at each other before starting to head towards the noise. Naruto wasn't sure why Kazuya looked so sad when he defended purple, but the older boy had hidden it so quickly that he decided to leave it. Kazuya would tell him eventually. Coming in view of a wide, flat training ground, they looked towards the two figures standing in the center and become rigid in shock at the sight. "I'm sorry I complained about your t-shirt," Kazuya whispered. "I now see there is much, much worse in the world." In the center of the space stood two men, doing some odd display of Janken-po. One was easily recognized with the gravity-defying silver hair and face mask, but the man opposite him was one they didn't recognize, and Kazuya silently hoped he wouldn't have to see him again. In a tight green jumpsuit with orange leg warmers and a red belt, Kazuya's eyes hurt looking at him. Unfortunately, one of the packages they had left was for the copy 9, so they had to get closer to the eyesore. Walking closer, the brunette winced as he spotted the shiny black bowl cut paired with massive bushy eyebrows. Beside him, Naruto was caught between sniggering at his friend and staring at the shinobi. He had never seen him before, but he seemed pretty close with Kashi. They stopped a short distance from the pair, catching the attention of the Junin. Halting their challenge, Kakashi looked over the redhead. He looked okay, and there was no caste. He had heard recent talk that the kid had been part of the group that had been advanced a year. While happy that Minato-sensei's kid was doing well, Kakashi felt pangs of guilt and disappointment tugging at his heart for having to find out through his fellow shinobi. He knew Naruto didn't depend on him as much. He was missing out on him growing up. "Hey Naruto, Kazuya, what's up?" Before he could get an answer, his eternal rival spoke up. "Hello, youthful friends of my eternal rival. I am Maito Gai, the Konoha's sublime green beast of prey," he announced, gaining a pair of wide-eyed stares. Kakashi glanced at his friend exasperatedly before looking at the boys again. What are you two doing today? Where's Ryo? Ryo-chan is with Tenji-san while we're doing deliveries for him. Speaking of, Kazuya answered, trailing off to look at his companion. Naruto reached into his bag and pulled out a scroll, pressing his right hand against the seal in the center, and summoning the packs of kunai and shuriken. Here, he said, passing them to the silver-haired shinobi. A pack of 20 kunai and shuriken. Kakashi looked down in surprise at the packets now in his hand. He knew that Naruto had met the shopkeeper and had been taught a few things, but he wasn't aware of their apparent part-time jobs. He was even more surprised that Naruto could already work storage seals. They were usually handled in the final year of the academy. As the boys turned to go, Kakashi called out, "Wait, I haven't seen you two in a while. How is your training going at the academy?" Naruto stopped and turned, Kazuya following his lead. The usually chatty brunette was quiet, just watching the interaction. Guy was doing the same, but Kakashi could see the focused look in his friend's eyes as he examined the students. "It's okay," the redhead shrugged. "I hit the targets more often, but my taijutsu and grades still suck. I can control 10 rocks now, though. Plus, I can sense people's chakra better when it moves around their bodies. I have one of the top grades in the class and one of the better target scores. My control and taijutsu still need a lot of work," added Kazuya. "That's great," Kakashi smiled. "If you need any help, you know you can ask anytime." "Yeah," Naruto replied, shifting his feet. There was a pause that grew more uncomfortable with each passing second. Kakashi didn't know what else to say, and Naruto had the same struggle. With all the time Kakashi spent away on missions, Naruto didn't know where he stood with him. He knew Kashi cared and wanted to help, but after this he probably wouldn't see the teen again for months. "Excuse me, but you mentioned taijutsu?" Guy interrupted, flashing his sparkling smile at the tiny redhead. Guy had heard of this boy and his brother from Kakashi. Kakashi had withdrawn into himself since the death of his sensei, and anyone was lucky to manage to pry enough from him to form a conversation. He had an unrelenting focus on his missions, and didn't socialize anymore. This was the first time Guy had really spoken to him in almost 6 months. But he knew that Kakashi hadn't completely shut down, still trying to be there for the two kids. Appearing to have increased to 3. It didn't seem to be going well. The two nodded at his question. "Well, my youthful friends, I happen to be a taijutsu master, and Kakashi just as skilled, so we can aid you now," he grinned, breaking out into his nice guy pose. Naruto gave a quick glance to the messenger bag at his side. "We still got a couple of things to deliver, but you could answer our questions?" Kazuya compromised, bringing out a book from his own bag. Walking forward, partly dragging the redhead, he presented the page of katas to the Junin. Guy's massive eyebrows rose, and Kazuya figured Kakashi had the same expression, but with the hair and the mask it was hard to be sure. "Red leg?" Guy read. "Why are you trying to learn this?" "Where did you get the book?" Kakashi asked. "Library, don't remember which shelf, but Akachan doesn't have to use his arm for this style," Kazuya replied to both. Kakashi took the book from his hands, and Guy peered at it, nodding to himself. "Naruto, you can't do these katas yet," Kakashi started. "This style is built on speed and flexibility. You'll need to build on your balance and basic fitness first, and then move on to flexibility. Speed will come with time. With the power of youth, I'm sure you can master this style, Naruto-kun." Guy spoke up, his teeth shining. Naruto and Kazuya each sent a confused glance to the other. "We can create a training regime for you to follow that will shape your young bodies into the ultimate example of youth," Guy proclaimed. "Same for you, Kazuya-kun, but we shall make yours so you can expand on the academy style. For now, go finish your deliveries and come back here when you're done. They should be ready by then," Kakashi promised. Bright smiles appeared on the students' faces, and they turned, heading out of the training ground and chattering away about the new opportunity opened up before them. Kakashi watched them go, the guilt in his gut lifting slightly. The rest of the trio's second year in the academy passed quickly. They kept up their extracurriculars, Kazuya continuing to help his friends study and gradually improving Naruto's reading abilities, Hana moving forward with her clan style and sparring with the boys, dumping them on the ground more often than not. Naruto working with them to increase the number of leaves the two older students could control at a time, while expanding his own exercises to include larger objects and holding leaves on his body for whole days at a time. And all three's target scores had increased by the end of the final term. Naruto and Kazuya had received a personal training regime as promised, with an agreement to upgrade it for third year if they could prove their progress. Their mornings now began with a jog around the sleeping village, as Naruto made sure to be back at the orphanage before anyone woke up. Kazuya had gentle muscle training, which could put power behind his hits, while Naruto had a series of stretches and balancing exercises to complete each day. All three had managed to make their way up the class rankings, with Kazuya third and Hana a close fourth. Naruto had worked his way up to the middle, with his taijutsu not quite good enough yet to let him get any further. They hadn't made any friends in the new class, with most of their classmates annoyed that kids younger than them were at the same level and beating most of them. Naruto had ended up in another two castes by the year's end, as the older kids made their displeasure clear during the taijutsu practices. As October rolled by, Naruto celebrated his birthday at Ichiraku's. Hana surprised him with an assortment of hair ties and clips, and a promise to teach him how to handle his growing locks, and Kazuya presented him 2 notebooks. When Naruto looked back at the brunette, Kazuya motioned him to open one. When he did, he found all the notes they had needed in first year, rewritten in an easy style with extra diagrams and references. Opening the second, he found the same but for second year. "I know you aren't a fan of studying, but I figured this could help you, so you got everything you need in one place," Kazuya explained, his hands fidgeting at his sides. Naruto placed the books on the counter and held out a fist in response, Kazuya bumping it with his own. As the redhead flicked through the pages, his grin threatening to take over his face, and Kazuya relaxed, shoving his hands into his pockets. He hadn't been sure Naruto would like them, but it meant that his friend would be able to look back at anything they had done any time. Kazuya just hoped they would make the theory tests a bit easier for the redhead. "This is awesome. Thanks, Pinku Baka," Naruto smiled, his blue eyes alight with joy. "Ryo-chan's got something for you too," Kazuya replied, grinning at the surprise on his face. Nodding to the blonde as Naruto turned to face him, Ryo held out a piece of paper to him, his violet eyes following his brother's movements carefully as Naruto took it. It was a card, Kazuya's writing at the top saying, "Happy birthday, Nissan," with a picture of Kazuya, Ryo and himself beneath it, holding hands, obviously done by Ryo. Naruto ran a hand over the childish scrawls, smiling faintly. "Thanks, Ryo," he whispered, a strange mixture of joy and sadness swirling within him. This was nothing like last year, when it was just Ryo and him in the orphanage. He had been pretty sure no one knew his birthday. He hadn't celebrated it since his third, when he still had parents and a baby brother that was only a few days from joining their family. As another year passed and Ryo grew up another bit more, his parents became part of a past that was getting further away each year. He shoved away those thoughts as he ruffled Ryo's already unruly locks, the toddler giggling. Perhaps the biggest surprise was the summons they had received from Tenjiro as they were finishing up their meal. Going along to the shop, the 4 of them entered before being waved through to the miniature training field at the back of the shop. Stepping outside, Naruto crossed over to Tenjiro, who was waving at him from the outside bench. The redhead spotted the assortment of black cloth and rolls of bandages on the table before shooting a confused look at the shopkeeper. "Naruto-kun, I'm going to put this on you, and let me know what you think when I'm done." Tenjiro picked up a roll of bandage and starting to wrap it around Naruto's left arm. Naruto's confusion only grew, and he looked over at his friends, his gaze catching the thoughtful look in Kazuya's dark pink eyes. It took a few minutes with Tenjiro occasionally directing Naruto to move his fingers and elbow when needed. Spending another short while adjusting, the shopkeeper finally stepped back, admiring his work. "That should do it. What do you think? Lucky you had your cast removed last week." Naruto looked down at his arm. It started as a regular fingerless glove with reinforced knuckles and a thin rectangular metal plate on the back of his hand. The black material making up the glove continued up to his shoulder, with a thick strap going around his chest to join the material at the back at the shoulder. The black material fit snugly against his arm, and Naruto could feel 3 strips of thin metal woven to it, going from his wrist to his elbow, running along the soft underside of his forearm. On top of his forearm was a sheet of metal that appeared to act as a bracer, but Naruto found its second use as he ran his other hand over it. 4 wire-thin pieces of metal looped around his forearm, connecting all the pieces. However, the only visible part was the bracer on the top. Around his elbow, the material was slightly thicker, with increased elasticity, allowing him to bend it freely. On his upper arm, there were 6 strips of metal around his bicep, running up to his shoulder, with 5 wires wrapping around to keep it firmly in place. It effectively created 2 thin cages around both his bicep and forearm. In all, it looked like a regular sleeve with a bracer and a glove at the end, but Naruto could feel the unseen support, firmly wrapped and hugging his arm. It weighed his arm down, but much less than would have been expected considering all the metal he could feel. It's just the prototype. I should be able to adjust anything that isn't quite comfortable. I can also import a lighter metal from my man in the land of iron and find a more breathable material so you won't need the bandages underneath. But I just wanted to see if it worked, Tanjiro muttered beneath his breath. Plus, I'll shape the metal so it's more like mesh encasing the whole arm than the strips it has now. At Naruto's wide-eyed stare, Tanjiro shook himself from his future modifications and felt he should explain. This can save you from having to get a new cast, as it not only supports your arm constantly, but since it's reinforced, it should be suitable for battle, protecting you from that kind of damage in the first place. Flexing his arm one more time, Naruto stared at his arm a moment longer before launching himself at the shopkeeper. Tanjiro looked down in surprise as he saw Naruto trying to hold back sobs before hugging the boy back. Naruto doubted the shopkeeper knew what he had done for him, at least not yet. All he had said was true, but to Naruto it was so much more. It was a real chance at getting through the academy, a chance at holding his own, and a chance to leave the hospital behind. Despite what others thought, Naruto knew his limits. He knew there was a higher chance he wouldn't be able to become a shinobi than he would. Every time he went for a cast, he had the staff telling him to give up, that he couldn't graduate if his arm didn't get better. He knew that his arm was still trying to heal the pathways, even after 3 years. He knew that every time his arm took a hit, it disrupted the delicate healing. There was no way they would let him in the field if he had to go to the hospital every other week, no matter how valuable they kept saying his sensing ability was. But this brace gave him new hope that he could stand on the same level as his friends, as their classmates. He had been fighting since his parents died. Fighting the hatred of the villagers for Ryo, the doubt in people's faces when he said he was going to be a shinobi, his own body. Maybe now he had a chance to prove he really could do it. He could win. Chapter 7. Well. If it isn't the consequences of my own actions, go up again. I don't have endless chakra, you know. One more time, then you have to teach me. You just got the hang of 5 rocks, and now I can learn to walk up a freaking tree. No, Pinkubaka, get to at least 10 rocks first. That's what the book said. Since when do you listen to books? Since I tried it when I was only at 6 rocks and almost blew my leg off. Twice, like the book said would happen. Fine. Naruto walked down rest of the trunk, jumping the last few meters to land lightly beside his friend. Grinning at the pout on Kazuya's face, he walked over to their bags and pulled out some water, chugging it down. It had taken 3 months to get to the top of the tree, and another month on top of that to be able to walk up and down the tree as he liked. It was all worth it to see the look on Kazuya's face, although explaining the extra bruises and the exhaustion hadn't been easy. How do you even have the chakra to do this? I barely have enough for the rocks, Kazuya whined. Gigi says it's 'cause I'm an Uzumaki, Naruto shrugged. Apparently, we just have a lot of chakra. Dropping his bottle back onto the bags, he turned. Jutsu? Sure, but I can't believe you hid this. I'm kinda proud yet bugged I didn't notice, Kazuya sighed. You were the one who wanted to do even more than our already full workload. It also means my stealth's getting better, Naruto pointed out, sitting down in front of his friend. True, Kazuya nodded, moving into position. Naruto had had a vague idea what Kazuya was up to from about a month into their third year. He was going into fourth-year stuff during their sessions at the library, plus he had talked him and Hana into sneaking into some of the fourth-year lessons. They knew something like Operation Jump wouldn't work a second time, but the redhead decided to leave the pink-eyed boy to it. Henge first, Kazuya added, his hands moving through the seals at the nod. There was a puff of smoke before the figure of Hana replaced Kazuya, taking a moment to throw a wink at the sitting boy before reverting back. The final member of their group was tied up with clan training today, but they had managed to see her for a brief time while they dropped off Ryo. Naruto had been concerned he was taking advantage of the Inuzuka by dropping off the toddler almost every day. However, the one time since that Ryo had stayed with Gigi for the day, it ended in disaster. Naruto still couldn't figure out how Ryo managed to end up 2 floors above where he should have been. With the Chunin on duty in various states of undress and distress, from what Hana had been saying, Kiba had caused just as much trouble. It had been decided that separating the two wasn't a good idea. At least the chaos could be contained to one place. Naruto was already sighing at the trouble they would get into when they were older. Did you get it? Kazuya broke into Naruto's chain of thought. A few more times, he replied, closing his eyes to focus on his sensing ability. Since it manifested 3 years ago, Naruto had been slowly working on his sensing ability to pinpoint how chakra moves within the body. He figured if he could move it the same way around his own body, then he could do jutsu without needing both hands for seals. He knew there were one-handed seals, but until he could track down a book or someone who knew them, he was stuck. They had been taught henge at the beginning of the year and recently kawarimi. 5 months into the school year and Naruto was no closer to performing either, but he was pretty sure he could map out Kazuya's chakra points and how his chakra flowed in his sleep. He just couldn't figure out how to get his chakra flow to bypass his arm. He knew that the chakra did not necessarily flow down his arms, and the seals were more for guiding the chakra within his body, but he'd been repeatedly told by Yakushi-sensei that he couldn't risk it. Your arm can't take the stress of channeling more than the amount required for it to function. The only good thing that had come out of this training was that Kazuya's ninjutsu was now the best out of all the kids in their class. As the older boy ran through henge several more times, Naruto's frustration grew as he failed to mimic the flow within his own body. He had to graduate the academy. He couldn't afford to get stuck here. His taijutsu kept improving through the exercises Guy had given them, and the brace Tenji-san had created for him meant he hadn't needed a cast in months. He even ranked 3rd from last in the class after the last maths test. Not dead last. The ninjutsu was part of the final test though, so no matter how well he did in everything else, he had to learn these. Naruto opened his eyes sullenly to see an image of Hana once again winking at him before changing back. Why couldn't he just be like everyone else? Why did the Kyuubi's chakra have to affect him so much? Why was Yakushi-sensei so sure that his arm couldn't take it? Questions swirled around Naruto's brain, doubt clouding his thoughts. If he could just use his left arm, then he could do henge. There wouldn't be any problems, and he would graduate just fine. Yakushi-sensei was probably overreacting like Kazuya did when he felt pain. He always recovered, right? Kazuya's voice washed over him, the words mumbled and distant, and Naruto looked down at his hands, considering. He stood abruptly, shoving off Kazuya's grip on his shoulder. Running through the hand seals he had watched the brunette run through day after day for months, he was surrounded by smoke. Looking down, Naruto wasn't sure he could express the joy that swelled within him at the sight of Kazuya's clothes on his body. He did it. He could do ninjutsu too, just like Hana and Kazuya and Hokage Gigi. His arm could take chakra like any other shinobi. The euphoria he felt lasted a few seconds before he was enveloped by a second puff of smoke. Reverting back to himself, the confusion only lasted a mere moment before he was forced to his knees. Blinding, excruciating pain overtaking all his senses. He felt himself coughing up something metallic tasting, but he barely gave it a single thought. All he could feel was pain, as if he were 3 years old again, lying amongst the ruins of his home. As if his arm were being ripped to shreds, his face pulsing with sharp agony. He didn't even notice when he succumbed to darkness. Kazuya watched in horror as Naruto coughed up blood, falling to the ground with a twisted expression on his face. He knew his friend had been frustrated with the lack of progress, but he didn't think the redhead would completely throw everything he had been warned about out the window. He dropped to the ground beside him, mind blank as he watched Naruto's pained expression, his scar almost enveloping his small face. His gaze moved to the blood on the grass and to the damp spots forming on the redhead's arm. He remained frozen for a moment longer before the silence was broken by a wet cough. Startled, Kazuya looked at his friend's face once more, before his thoughts snapped back. Gathering the younger boy in his arms, trying to avoid Naruto's left, he stood and his legs trembled slightly. He had 2 years and a whole head of height on Naruto, but he struggled to keep the boy in his grip, taking his first steps towards the village. Luckily, they weren't that far out, but the 20 minutes that it would take to get back weighed heavily on the brunette's mind every second that passed. Just before he reached the outer edge of the village, Kazuya heard the loud bellowing of a spandex-covered Junin coming from a nearby training area. He swerved off course, heading directly to the shouting. Readjusting his grip on Naruto, he staggered into the field and spotted the bright green Gai-san! He saw the bowl cut turn, his teeth briefly shining as he smiled before a horrified look crossed his face. He launched himself towards them, taking Naruto from the brunette's arms. "I'll take him to the hospital. Make your way there as quickly as you can," Guy shot out, arranging the boy in his arms so he could run. "Ask for Yakushi-sensei." Kazuya managed to get out before the pair became a blur, disappearing a second later. Kazuya began to follow after them, his gait steadier without the extra weight. He felt a hand rest on his shoulder and flinched, spinning to stare at the man. A senbon poked out his mouth and a bandana covered straight brown hair. Teary pink eyes met calm brown. "Is there anyone who needs to know he's injured? A guardian or a teacher?" Kazuya took a step back, glancing in the direction that Guy had taken off in. "Who are you?" The man's eyes widened slightly before a chuckle escaped him. "I'm Genma, Guy's Jinin teammate and Tokubetsu Junin of Konoha. And yours?" Kazuya looked down, wiping his eyes. "Kazuya and Naruto. We go to the academy." "Naruto?" Genma shot out. Kazuya eyed the Junin, confused. This wasn't the first time that someone had overreacted to his friend's name, and he didn't really get it. Yeah, he says that he was named after the Yondaime's son. He could see this information turning over in Genma's head. He's got a brother, but Naruto doesn't want him anywhere near the hospital. Kazuya answered his earlier question. "That's it?" The man frowned. "Hokage-sama?" Kazuya added. "Or Kakashi-san if he's in the village." The boy missed the shinobi's eyebrow rising further. "I'll take you to the hospital, and then I will inform the Hokage," the man decided, kneeling down and gesturing for Kazuya to climb onto his back. Kazuya hesitated for a second before shaking it off and climbing onto Genma's back. What mattered now was Naruto. There was a distant beeping, constant and in sync with each beat of his heart. With each beep it got louder, and Naruto could faintly discern people in the background. Caught between falling back into the darkness and finding out who was there, the decision was made when he heard the low voice of his godfather. Why were they? He didn't hear the rest of the question as the light seared his brain, being replaced by a heavy, cotton feeling when he snapped his eyes shut. Now he was slightly more aware, the feeling was similar throughout his body. He didn't think he could move if he tried. Naruto? He made another attempt at looking at the owner of the voice, and the blurry view of a man slowly came into focus. It's been years since he'd seen Jiraiya, or Eros Sennin, as he and his mother had called him, but the man looked the same as he did the day of the Kyuubi attack. Looking past him, he saw Jiji frowning at him. "Do you know where you are?" asked Jiraiya, bringing Naruto's attention back to him. "Hospital." The boy croaked, throat like sandpaper. He would recognize the itchy sheets and drab walls anywhere. He greedily drank the water Jiraiya held to his mouth. "Do you know why you're here?" Jiji spoke up. Naruto's brow scrunched slightly before he looked away, refusing to meet the hard gaze. Naruto. The boy felt like hunching his shoulders, trying to become a smaller target. He couldn't tell if his body had obeyed yet. It was so heavy. Overdid it training. That's not the whole story, is it? Naruto's eyes flicked over to the old man's face, and he would have flinched at the expression if he could. I used the normal seals for henge, and it worked, but then I changed back, and all I could feel was pain. The unspoken word echoed through the room. Naruto shifted uncomfortably, his body beginning to feel a bit more movable, if still full of lead. You were told that you cannot use the normal hand seals, you were told never to use your left arm for ninjutsu, and you were told to have regular checkups, the Hokage thundered, each word growing louder than the next. You disobeyed every single one, and now you may never become a shinobi at all. Naruto's head snapped towards the Hokage, regretting the sharp movement only a moment before the last statement sank in. What? Jiji let out a heavy sigh before sinking into the chair behind him. Naruto had never really realized how old the man was. He teased him about it sometimes, but right now the man had every single year etched into his face. Your chakra pathways in your arm were ruptured and corroded in the QB attack, and since you were so young, we thought they would heal in time, allowing full use of your arm again. Even though you kept damaging them during the academy, there was still a chance for a total recovery, since the incidents were mild. Naruto's eyes were wide as he absorbed the words. When you used henge, you completely ripped them apart. Not only that, but it was discovered that some of the QB's chakra was stored in some of the cells in your arm. That was why it could never heal properly, as it should have done. This chakra spread through your pathways and destroyed them further, meaning there is no chance of recovery. Naruto couldn't identify all the emotions that were building as he latched onto the last 4 words. A tangled web of dread, horror, despair. But as Jiji continued, Naruto felt like the worst was yet to come. You were unconscious for 3 weeks. I called Jiraiya here, and he sealed your arm so you can never channel chakra through it again, in the hopes of preventing further spread of the QB's chakra. The seal is irreversible, and while it cancels out the QB's chakra, it also cancels out yours in that limb. But Naruto's chest started to hurt, before he remembered he was supposed to breathe. He didn't feel Jiraiya squeeze his hand. Some of the chakra made it to your chest. It made it to the cellular level before we realized what had happened, so it's not in your chakra network anymore. There is little damage done, but over time it will get worse. Your organs will start to fail. Naruto, you're dying. Time stopped. The noises in the room faded until his ragged breaths and thudding heart were the only things he heard. Dying. The word bounced around his head. Dead like his parents. Although he knew death, had felt someone's chakra being snuffed out, the concept still felt beyond him. He couldn't even begin to process, to imagine. It seemed so far away. He was 6, almost 7. He hadn't always felt his age, but right now he couldn't think anything but how short his life had been. Plus he felt fine. Still heavy and a bit achy, but nothing like dying. He'd always thought dying meant you could feel it, feel yourself fading away or feel the pain. He didn't. His chest felt fine. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was going to become a shinobi. Who would look out for Rio? He tuned back into the room, hearing the low arguing of the 2 men. Jiraiya thought they shouldn't have told him. Naruto was glad they did. Despite everything he was feeling, he'd rather know. He could shift his limbs now. What now? His voice was so small that the pair didn't hear him until the 3rd time. Jiraiya came back to sit beside him. You just underwent the sealing procedure, so you will feel heavy and groggy until the drugs wear off. After that, you'll spend some time recovering here before going back to the orphanage. You'll have some time before you start at the civilian school. Wait, interrupted Naruto. Civilian school? His godfather nodded. You can't become a shinobi anymore, so why not? Jiraiya remained silent for a moment. His godchild looked so different from the last he had seen him. With his shoulder-length red hair and round cheeks, he was the spitting image of Kushina at this age. The long, ragged scar down his face couldn't hide that. The blue eyes, though, they were all Minato. They had the same look Minato used to give him when told he couldn't do something. The brat usually went and did it anyway, successful every single time. I couldn't use my arm before, Naruto pointed out. Yes, but your chest. Naruto's gaze switched to Gigi. How long? He stammered out. Hiruzen and Jiraiya shared a look before looking back at the child. He was so young, so small. It was obvious the news had rattled him, but they had not anticipated him to talk about it so soon. They really should have known that the young Uzumaki wouldn't accept becoming a civilian. He had always had a remarkable focus for one so young. It reminded them so much of Minato. We do not know for sure, but we estimate 20 years or so. Depending on the rate of erosion and any outside accelerants, it could be as few as 10 years, the Hokage answered. Naruto picked out 20 years from the explanation, ignoring the rest. That's ages away. Jiraiya sighed. Naruto, it would be dangerous for you. Without your arm in full health and the symptoms that are sure to appear in the future. But both men remained silent at that word, more weight behind it that should be in any 6-year-old's voice. It's dangerous for everyone, even amazing ninja like Tuchan and Kachan. Naruto frowned. People die on missions and I'm dying anyway. It seemed simple to him. He still couldn't wrap his head around the whole death thing. It was too far away, too abstract, but staying in the village as a civilian wouldn't change anything. He still needed to look out for Ryo, and being a shinobi was the best way to do that. Hiruzen considered his words. The boy had been through so much, had lost so much. He had a maturity about him that he wasn't supposed to have, not at this age. He figured it was because he was put into the academy so early, but also that he had to grow up for his brother, to protect and provide for the only family he had left. He broke off Jiraiya's retort. You can continue in the academy. Blue eyes filled with hope while gray with shock. Sensei? You can continue, but there are rules you will follow. Naruto nodded his head, wincing slightly at the remnants of his headache. First, you will not train unless under the supervision of a Junin. Second, you will train in the training grounds closest to the village. Third, you will have weekly checkups, and you will follow everything they tell you. And finally, if you feel anything different or sore, you get it checked immediately. Understood? Yes, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen blinked in surprise at the honorific. Naruto had never used it before, and the solemn expression on his face didn't belong there either. I'll become so good that you'll never regret this, the boy continued, his face breaking into a wide grin. Believe it. Hiruzen found that he already did. Not long after, Naruto was allowed other visitors, and Kazuya burst into the room, pink eyes wide and hair ruffled. Aka-chan! He wailed. He lunged in for a hug before slapping the younger boy on the head. Ow, what the fuck? Kazuya pinned him with a glare. If you ever do that again, I swear I'll... Knock me out? Put me in the hospital? Naruto interrupted cheekily. I'll replace all your clothes with neon pink spandex, Kazuya retorted. Naruto's mouth hung open for a second before he dissolved into laughter. I mean it, with glitter. That only made Naruto laugh harder. Once it died down, Naruto looked at his friend and startled at the wretched expression. I was really scared, Naruto. I mean, you just went down and there was blood and I wasn't fast enough to get you to the hospital and... Kazuya ran on, running out of oxygen at the end as he tried to keep back the sobs. Naruto sobered. I'm sorry, Kazuya. I just got so angry that I couldn't do it, and I didn't think it would be this bad, he explained. But thank you for what you did, Gigi told me. What did they do? His friend asked, pointing at the bandages that covered the redhead's arm from fingertips to shoulder. They sealed my arm so I can never use chakra in it again. Erosenin said that the seals will look kind of like tattoos. Erosenin? Oh yeah, Jiraiya. I just call him that, 'cause he's a massive pervert. At least that's what Kachan always said. Kazuya shot him a look, his eyes still glassy. You know I was kidding when I asked if you knew the Sanin, right? Seriously, the way everyone reacts to your name and the fact you know the Hokage, the Kopinen and Jiraiya-sama. What the hell? Kazuya asked, completely puzzled. Naruto looked away. Kazuya, there is a reason for all that, but I can't tell you. The brunette opened his mouth to argue, but Naruto continued. Yet, anyway, Ryo deserves to know first, and I have to wait until he's older. Kazuya closed his mouth, pink eyes swirling with one thought after another, net before he seemed to come to a decision. Okay, Akachan, I'll wait. But what did you mean never use chakra? I mean that I can't use chakra in my arm, like ever, Naruto replied. Before it could have healed and I could have used it like you, but now I can't. And Kazuya waited as Naruto fell silent. And Naruto looked over at his friend, slightly less upset than when he entered. If he could trust anyone, it would be Kazuya, right? He sighed. Well, 3 weeks later, Naruto was allowed to leave the hospital. Kazuya had taken the news about as well as Naruto expected, but he had promised to keep quiet, even to Hana. He felt a bit better knowing Kazuya had his back. His friend visited almost every day after the academy and made sure he was caught up on the work. Hana often joined them, but they always said it was a training accident when she asked why Naruto was there. The Inuzuka visited a few times, bringing Ryo with them. Naruto didn't like his brother seeing him like this, so he made sure that Tsume would limit the visits. By the sound of it, Ryo wasn't doing well in his absence, even with Kiba and Kazuya there. When he was finally discharged, Kazuya and Jiraiya came to pick him up, Ryo waiting for him at the Inuzuka compound. He was to have the bandages off before he left since his arm had healed nicely. Apparently, once the pathways healed up in the absence of chakra, they wouldn't become damaged again like before, since there was no chakra or anything to disrupt them anymore. He would still be able to use it physically, although it would always be weaker. It was virtually a chakra dead zone. When Yakushi-sensei unraveled the bandages, he had heard a gasp from Kazuya. Naruto had seen it before, when his bandages were changed, but it was still a shock every time he saw it. Black lines that overlapped the chakra pathways were the predominant feature, but there were swirls and lines made up of symbols and kanji. It started at the top of his shoulder and stopped at his fingertips. Jiraiya checked over his work once more, nodding to himself. He was told by the Sannin that it would need to be adapted and modified as he grew up, but it would hold for the next few years. Once free from the starched white walls, Naruto threw himself into training. He was all right on the book stuff since Kazuya helped him in the hospital, but his taijutsu was worse, and he had yet to figure out how to do henge. He knew he had to track down a Junin to supervise, and Gai-san was more than willing to help them with their taijutsu, but he couldn't help them much on the ninjutsu. A week after he left the hospital, Jiraiya came to Naruto's aid. "Hey Gaki," the man said, walking up to the redhead. Naruto looked up from his history textbook. A few meters behind him, Kazuya and Hana were competing to see who could control the most rocks, the 3 puppies lazing around them. Kazuya had reached 7 while Hana was at 6, repeatedly trying to add her 7th. The few times that Naruto tracked down Kakashi or Guy with a few hours to spare, the first thing he had tried was the leaf exercise. He had practiced regulating his chakra in the hospital when there was no one around to yell at him for it, but it wasn't the same. As he added leaf after leaf, Naruto had noticed it. It was easier. Before he'd had to regulate it while actively keeping it away from his left arm, something that had taken months to get a hold of. That had been the point of starting so early on his chakra control to bypass his arm. Now, though, he could just let it circulate his body, the chakra never passing the barrier that the seals created. Although it did some getting used to, proven by the many bruises he had accumulated by either rocks falling on him or falling out of trees. So his chakra control was better than ever, but he was unable to translate it into ninjutsu. "I'm not doing anything, so I don't need supervision," was the first thing out of his mouth, making sure his godfather knew he was keeping to the rules. "I know, that's not what I'm here for. What is on your arm?" Naruto looked down at the black brace. "Tenji-san gave it to me. It's a brace. Helps me in fights," Naruto replied. He'd barely taken the thing off unless it was to sleep or bathe. Interesting design. "Anyway, Gaki, the great Jiraiya-sama, have decided to sacrifice some of my precious research time to help you," the Sannin announced, striking his trademark pose. The redhead looked at him with an eyebrow raised. Jiraiya internally wept. What had happened to the toddler who had clapped and giggled at his presence? The pair looked behind them at the sound of a yelp, watching Hana rub her knee while the rocks were spread out around her. Kazuya started to laugh, forgetting his own exercise, and let out his own yell when the rock he had been holding above him fell on his head. Hana then began to mock him and it quickly dissolved into a taijutsu battle. Naruto turned back to Jiraiya, with a bright smile on his face. With what, Erosenin? Jiraiya grumbled for a moment, Naruto catching the words respect and brat and redheads, before he once again focused. One-handed seals. Naruto's eyes widened and he shot up, the textbook abandoned to the side. What? I've heard that you've been trying to learn them for months, even before the accident. So I've decided to help you, Jiraiya answered. Naruto's eyes filled with wonder, and he seemed to vibrate with energy and excitement. Okay, show me, he demanded, focusing his sensing ability and waiting to sense the pathway the Sanin's chakra would take. Jiraiya's eyes narrowed a fraction before he put his goofy smile back into place. His godson had come a long way with his sensing ability. It almost reminded him of the Byakugan. Of course, Naruto could only sense chakra, not see it, but it seemed the boy had fine-tuned it enough that he could achieve the same effect at close quarters. However, he doubted his range had improved much. He'd missed the last 3 years of his godson's life, and the first 3 years of Minato's youngest. He figured he at least owed Naruto the help with his ninjutsu. He still watched out for them however he could, keeping up to date with Naruto's progression through the academy and Ryo's life with the Inuzuka. He knew he couldn't stay. Not only did he have his network to manage, but he wasn't cut out to look after children. They were better off where they were. He could teach them a few things when he was here, and maybe one day Naruto could even sign the Toad summoning contract or come traveling with him. And, although Naruto had his mother's face, he had his father's eyes, their determination to succeed. He didn't think he could look at the boys every day and be reminded of what he had lost. No. It was better that he stayed away. He buried the voice inside him screaming, "Coward." All right then, pay close attention then copy me. Chapter 8. 3 Different Kinds of Exam Takers. Naruto knew Kazuya had been planning something. He knew at the beginning of 3rd year, and he decided to leave his friend to it, thinking if it was really important, then the brunette would tell them in good time. Good time, meaning they would have enough time to prepare for whatever the boy had schemed up. In the future, he would make sure to call out Pinkubaka's bullshit the moment he suspected. Naruto looked at the bundle of forms in front of him, before glancing at Hana. She shrugged back at him, just as clueless before they both looked at the culprit. "Pinkubaka, why have you given us the forms to apply for early graduation?" Naruto asked suspiciously. "Clues in the name, Aka-chan." Kazuya rolled his eyes as he took his seat at the table. The trio were in the Inuzuka compound today, babysitting Kiba while Tsume was out on business. The toddlers were in the next room competing on who could draw the scariest monster. The older trio were sitting around the dinner table, initially studying for the end-of-year test before Kazuya dropped the bomb. "There is no way they are going to let us skip another year," Naruto sighed. "We've already proven we can do it though," argued Kazuya. "There's no real reason they should say no, 'cause if we're not ready, then we fail and have to do the year anyway." "We're nowhere near ready though," Hana pointed out. "I mean, we've barely covered the 4th year stuff, and Naruto was only in the hospital a few months ago." "Hey, what do you mean only?" "It's been almost 6 months, Naruto snapped. He hated when people brought that up. Thankfully, Yakushi-sensei had dropped his checkups to once a month now, but everyone still thought he was fragile despite all the progress he had made. "You know what I mean, Naru. None of us are ready." "We can be," Kazuya reasoned, leaning forward on the table. "We have covered the 4th year stuff. We just need to revise it properly. Your taijutsu is strong, and mine and Aka-chan's should be good enough. We can all do the 3 jutsu." "I still can't do bunshin, like 7 times out of 10, piped up Naruto. "I can't break out of genjutsu," added Hana. "You can't do kawarimi," they both said together, high-fiving at their synchronicity. Kazuya scowled at their laughter. "I can so." "You never swap with the right object, Pinkubaka. You tried to swap with a chair and ended up swapping with a desk 2 classrooms over, yesterday. So we all have a few improvements to make. That's why we have a month to fix them." Kazuya waved off the snickering. The mirth died down as the two looked seriously down at their forms. Can we really be ready in a month?" wondered Hana, chewing her lip. We've done this in half the time before, Kazuya pointed out. But this is graduation, the final test. Doubt still clouded her expression. Naruto stared at the form. He'd promised Jiji that he wouldn't regret letting him continue to train as a shinobi. Maybe if he graduated early, well earlier, then he could show Jiji how serious he is. He could prove that he wasn't going to let his health hold him back. What's the plan? Naruto looked at his friend, his face set in determination. Hana stared at the redhead in surprise before turning to look at Kazuya. The brunette unleashed a devious grin. The training from hell. Uzumaki Norio lived a simple life. Living at the orphanage with his brother, going to the park, spending his days with Kiba at his house, going for ramen with Kashi, helping Jiji. That was all he knew. He remembered the days before Nissan went to the academy. Sure, Nissan had spent most of his days with books, and nobody wanted to be friends with him, but they had each other. Nissan was always there. Now though, Ryo noticed that Nissan wasn't around as much. Ever since the first time Nissan and Kazumi had left him with Kiba and his mum, the pair disappeared hours at a time, along with Kiba's Ni-chan. Ryo wasn't really complaining. He had made his first friend, and even though Kiba annoyed him sometimes and made fun of him for his hair, Ryo wouldn't trade him for anything. He had hoped that he could keep making more and more friends forever. Then Nissan ended up in hospital, and the worst 6 weeks of Ryo's short life began. He still hung out with Kiba during the day, but he knew something was wrong with his brother. Nobody would tell him what it was or why, and he was only allowed to visit Nissan a few times. He still had to go back to the orphanage for bedtime, and it was those times that he really felt the absence of his brother. He knew the matron didn't like him. She'd never spoken to him other than to glare before, always talking to Nissan when she had to. With Nissan gone, she started to yell at him more than any of the other kids, and sometimes didn't give him breakfast, saying he was a bad boy. Ryo still couldn't figure out what he had done. She never heard his cries either when the other kids ganged up on him, calling him names and taking away his stuff. They even tried to take Inu-chan away from him, but that was the only time they failed. The matron had locked him in a cupboard as punishment for hurting the other kids. They had a favorite word though. One they'd heard the matron call him a few times. Monster. Ryo couldn't understand why this was happening. He knew that they didn't like him, but why do these things to him? Why was he a monster? Even the villagers seemed colder, harsher. But as Ryo thought about it, he'd never really looked at them before, too busy talking to Nissan or Kazune. Kazune was the one to walk with him between the orphanage and Kiba's house, but he didn't talk as much. Ryo could see that he was making an effort to be cheerful around him, but it was so fake. He missed Nissan too. There was no sign of Kashi. Nissan had told him before he went to the hospital that he was on another mission. Then Nissan came back and everything went back to the way it was. He never told his brother about what happened while he was away. He didn't want to worry him, and after they saw Nissan, it stopped. They still glared at him, but after one kid shouted monster at him at breakfast, Nissan had dragged the kid outside. That evening, Ryo had overheard the same kid whining about his broken nose. The next day at breakfast, no one spoke a word to Ryo. Any time the matron looked as though she was going to speak to him, Nissan intervened. Ryo began to see Nissan in a new light. He had never really noticed these things before, but now he could see each time Nissan prevented something bad from happening, every time he spoke to the matron, glared at the kids, glowered at the villagers. Nissan was protecting him. Ryo remembered a conversation he'd had with Jiji before he met the Inuzuka. He'd asked Jiji what a Hokage was. Jiji had they were the strongest ninja in the village, the greatest protectors of the will of fire, whatever that was. Maybe if Ryo was Hokage, he could protect his brother and make sure no one was mean to them ever again. He could protect Kazumi and Kiba and Kashi. He could protect his family too. To say that Hideki-sensei was not impressed when they presented him with the forms the day before the test would be like saying Naruto was only slightly partial to ramen. They hadn't even had time to place their forms on the table before Hideki-sensei belted out a resounding no. Naruto looked at Kazuya, hoping his friend could see the ease. "I fucking told you this would happen," in his eyes. The bastard ignored him. For the next hour, Hana and Naruto stood back, watching as Kazuya threw every single argument he could think of at their sensei. As the minutes rolled by, Naruto was suddenly very glad he was on Kazuya's side, as he witnessed his friend actually succeeding at wearing down their sensei. At the 86-minute mark, Hideki-sensei let out a massive sigh, silencing Kazuya's next remark, and he flopped into his chair. He looked over at them. "Do you really think you can pass? Graduation is very different than the test you took to get into second year," he sighed, resigned. "We're ready," Hana declared, Naruto nodding beside her. Kazuya hadn't been kidding about the hell part of their training. Naruto had never been so tired, even when they were preparing for second year. It was worth it though, and now they could see if it all paid off. "Even you, Naruto? You know how far behind you compared to these two, and with your medical history?" Hideki-sensei trailed off, glancing at Naruto's arm. "You passing would be luck really. These two have dragged you this far. You have to take the final exam on your own." "I can do it," Naruto shot back. Hideki-sensei let out another long sigh before surveying them all. "Fine, but be prepared to be disappointed." Naruto didn't miss the not-so-subtle glance his way. It was finally the morning of the test. As the fourth-year class filed in, the three additions waited until all had grabbed their seats before entering the classroom. Showing the sensei their signed forms, he stared dubiously at them before recognition seemed to light up his eyes. "Didn't you three already advance a year?" "Yes." Kazuya waited to see if the sensei would make his point known. The sensei just stared at them a moment longer before shaking his head and waving his hand in the direction of some empty seats. Sitting down, the brunette looked over to his friends, seeing Hana's nervous look and Naruto's. "Akachan?" The redhead barely heard him, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. What was he doing? He wasn't ready. He wasn't like his friends. He wasn't special. He just happened to pass that second-year test. It was luck. He still struggled with Bunshin, and he was going to mess up the written test, and he was going to fail, and the other two would pass, and they would graduate, and he would be alone. "Naruto!" His head snapped up as he looked into a pair of worried pink eyes. "It'll be okay. You're ready." "We've gotten this far," added Hana. Naruto nodded before busying himself with ensuring his hair was secured. Hana had kept her promise to help him with his hair, and now he could confidently use 4 different styles. His favorite was the half up, half down. When he was doing taijutsu or training, he could just tie up the bottom half with another hair tie. The trio's heads were drawn to the front as the sensei began to speak. "All right, welcome to the graduation exam. First, there will be the written portion, and it will include everything you have covered these past 4 years. We'll then move on to the practical portion, consisting of weapon handling, a brief taijutsu spar, and breaking out of an E-rank genjutsu. Finally, you will be asked to perform at least 2 of the E-rank ninjutsu you have been taught. We will choose which ones. You will be told whether you have passed or failed after the ninjutsu portion, as we'll tally up your marks as the day goes on. Any student caught cheating fails automatically and will have to redo their final year. Any questions?" The class remained silent and the sensei started to pass out the test papers. Naruto stared down at the front sheet before picking up his brush and filling in his name. "You have an hour. Start." Naruto turned over the page and read over the first question. Nope. He moved on to the second. Also no. The third. He could do the third one. He'll go back to the other 2 later, and back to the fourth too. He made his way through the test, slowly acclimatizing to the types of question. Close to the end of the time, he went back to the first 2, finding they weren't as daunting as when he first laid eyes on them. Maybe he could do this. Nope, only the first one. He rapidly scribbled answers that seemed right into the spaces for the second and fourth as the sensei called time. As his paper was taken away, Naruto let his head fall to the desk, suddenly remembering 2 other questions he'd left unanswered. "Now make your way to the targets outside. No talking." Naruto stood and looked over to his friends, shrugging at their questioning gazes. He probably failed, but at this point he had other tests to worry about. He'll be miserable later, with ramen to soften the blow. He tied the lower half of his hair back. The next part of the test went much more smoothly. Naruto sinking 5 of his kunai and 4 of his shuriken into the target, only missing the one shuriken. They were pretty close to the center too. As the sensei read out his score, 71-100, take that Hideki-sensei, he started to feel a bit better about the whole thing. He was always better at the hands-on stuff anyway. His friends did well too, Hana with a score of 87 and Kazuya with 79. Next was the taijutsu portion, and they had pit him against an Akimichi. Again, his red leg style was still shoddy, but he was faster and more flexible than he'd been in the second-year test. He was much fitter too, thanks to Gaison's training advice, and he had his brace. He was feeling good about this. He watched as Kazuya faced off against a female Uchiha, wincing as his friend was slammed against the ground, and the match was called. The Uchiha were a force to be reckoned with, but Kazuya lasted longer than the rest of the class had expected. In contrast, the no-clan student who faced Hana, his face twisted into a sneer, as he mocked her for both her age and gender, was launched out of the ring within 2 minutes. Naruto smirked as he high-fived her on her way back to their small group. That guy had lost the moment he had stepped into the ring. Then it was his turn. He bounced on the balls of his feet as he watched his opponent shoot the same look to the sensei that his fellow clan member had over a year ago. He clenched his fists tighter. When the match started, the Akimichi started with the same slow punch as his clan member the first time, and Naruto repeated his same first moves, jabbing into the armpit and kicking the back of the legs. This time, though, as he buzzed around the ring, he used his legs to land hits while utilizing his arms for balance. He danced out of the way of meaty fists that were faster, now that the Akimichi boy realized that he couldn't land a hit. As Naruto wore the other boy down, the older kid managed to land a strong hit, sending the redhead to the ground. He kicked him in the stomach, but Naruto used the momentum to get back on his feet, if a bit unsteadily. The Akimichi landed another hit on him, softened by the brace as Naruto blocked and jumped away, close to the edge of the ring. As the older boy charged him, hoping to end the spar, Naruto looked down and an idea popped in his head. This would either win him the match or it would really hurt. Or both. As the Akimichi loomed over him, Naruto dove between his legs, for the first time thankful that he was so small. Rolling into a stand, Naruto turned and jumped, slamming both feet into the Akimichi's back. The bigger boy stumbled forward, his hands outside the ring as he fell to his knees. The match was called as Naruto slammed into the ground, his breath leaving him suddenly and the back of his head throbbing. He climbed to his feet and made his way over to Hana and Kazuya, both grinning their faces off. His own was probably just as wide, and he ignored the shocked faces of the class around them, taking out the bottom hair tie and shaking out the kinks that had formed around the hair tie. The 3 of them passed the genjutsu portion easily, and for the final part of the test, they were individually called into a separate room to perform their jutsu. It was done in alphabetical order, unlike the taijutsu matches, and Kazuya was up first. Naruto and Hana stared at the door for 10 minutes until Kazuya walked out, forehead protector around his neck and a spring in his step. The rest of the class were processed, some successful, while others not. Hana's turn came up, and she walked through the door 15 minutes later with her headband on her forehead and the Haimaru brothers circling her feet. Naruto's nerves got worse as time went on, and more kids filed out with their results. As the kid before him came out in tears, missing a headband, Naruto stood and nodded to his friends. Heading into the room, he stood in front of the sensei, 2 of them now, and awaited instructions. Uzumaki Naruto, perform kawarimi with the chair in the corner of the room. Then swap back. He looked over and let out a breath, performing the one-handed seal Erosenin had taught him 5 months ago, and swapped with the chair, pausing for a second before going back to the center of the room, the chair in its previous position. He spotted the surprised looks on their faces, probably not expecting the unusual seals. Now perform henge. Change into either a family member or someone you admire. Naruto silently cheered, thanking whatever kami-sama that was out there that it wasn't Bunshin. He considered it for a moment before a cloud of smoke surrounded him. When it cleared, the 2 Chunin could have sworn they'd seen a ghost. Namikaze Minato stood before them, in his uniform and iconic red and white coat, twirling a three-pronged Hiraishin kunai in his right hand. A confident smile was on his angular face, framed by untamed blonde locks, and his blue eyes shone with a strange mixture of amusement and sadness. The Chunin would have had trouble telling him from the real Yondaime had he been alive. Smoke clouded their view of him, and Naruto reappeared, the change jarring them slightly. Naruto watched them note something down, still amused by his image. They would probably never believe that he had chosen both options, rather than just the hero one. It wasn't even the first image that had come to mind. The most distinct memory of his father he had wasn't the same as the rest of Konoha, as the one he had just shown. No, Naruto remembered his father coming from the kitchen. No headband or flak jacket, just his regular clothes with a pink apron over them. A tender smile on his face as he watched his wife and son go over the alphabet. But he was just a no-name orphan. It would be suspicious if he had shown that, especially if the Yondaime was just his hero. He snapped out of his musings as the sensei began to speak. Congratulations, Uzumaki. You have passed the exams. In summary, your written test was poor, barely scraping the pass mark, but you made up for it with your practical skills. You ranked dead last out of those who passed, but you are now a genin of Konoha. He held out a headband, and Naruto stepped forward and took it, trying to contain his joy. He tied it around his left arm on the brace with some difficulty, before he left to enter the classroom. He spotted Hana and Kazuya looking at him, and he raised his arm, the afternoon sun glinting off the metal. The rest was a blur. Some kids they didn't recognize being named Rookie and Kunoichi of the Year, and instructions for those who passed to return to the classroom tomorrow morning. The three only just managed to keep their joy contained until they got outside, yelling and screaming and proudly proclaiming to the world that they were officially ninja of Konoha. The time passed in a blink of an eye, and suddenly it was the next morning. The three seated in the same place as the previous day, while they waited for the sensei to arrive and slot them into teams. They weren't oblivious to the stares from the other kids, but they ignored them in favor of wondering about the teams. It hadn't really occurred to them before, but they could be split up. After 2 years of helping each other, working together, hanging out, they could be thrust into completely alien teams. As the sensei finally walked in with the list, a file of Junin moving to stand in a line behind him, the three tensed. Congratulations again to those who are here. I will now read off the teams and who your Junin sensei will be. Once called, you will follow your Junin out, and you'll be out of my hands. Now Team 1. The sensei started to list off names and the students filed out, the room emptying quickly. Team 7 is Arai Kazuya, Inuzuka Hana, and Uzumaki Naruto. Your Junin sensei will be Shiranui Genma. The trio exchanged delighted glances before spotting their new sensei. Kazuya's mouth opened slightly in recognition, the man who'd been with Gaison that day. The man smirked around his senbon and waved for them to follow. The three scrambled and followed the man to the roof of the academy, seating themselves on the steps as he leaned on the rails. The Haimaru brothers settled down behind Hana. So, you're the infamous Trouble Trio? Were the first words out of his mouth. Trouble Trio? Infamous? You guys are not only responsible for what is known by the Academy Chunin as Hell Week, and notorious for abandoning the curriculum, but all three of you graduated in only 2 years, he elaborated. The three students exchanged glances, not quite sure what to say. Anyway, introductions. State your name, age, what you like, don't like, strongest and weakest skills, hobbies and dreams for the future. Inuzuka, you first, and we'll go round. We already know this, though, pointed out Kazuya. I don't. Hana shrugged and began to speak. I'm Hana Inuzuka, and I'm 10. These three behind me are the Haimaru brothers. I like meat, helping Kachan, my clan, and training. I don't like bullies, animals being hurt or being underestimated just 'cause I'm a girl. My strongest skills are my clan techniques and taijutsu. I'm weak against genjutsu. My hobbies are helping out Kachan and training. I want to be the best veterinarian in my clan. Kazuya grinned at her before starting. I'm Arai Kazuya, and I'm 9. I like dango, reading and training. I don't like my uncle or stuff that bores me. My strongest skills are studying and coming up with plans. My weak points are my taijutsu and kawarimi. My hobbies are reading, hanging out at the park, and training. I haven't really thought about my dream, he finished uncertainly, frowning. And finally, the redhead. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, and I'm 7. I like my brother, my friends, ramen, training, and the color orange. I hate hospitals, studying, and people who are mean to my brother and friends. My strongest skills are my sensing ability and chakra control. My weak points are ninjutsu and studying. My hobbies are training and hanging out in the park. My dream is to be a strong shinobi like my parents and to be able to protect my brother. Genma raised a single eyebrow. You all like training? The students remained silent and just waited. Well, you know my name and I'm older than I look. I like senbon and I don't like power plays. I'm strong enough to be a tokubetsu junin. My hobbies are, I'll tell you when you're older. My dream is to retire peacefully and I'll tell you when you're older too. Genma finished, relaxing against the rails. So, he continued, ignoring their annoyance. Normally there would be an extra test after this that would test your teamwork, but you guys are a special case. Wait, extra test? Hana exclaimed. Yeah, we pit you against each other to see if you can work as a team or not, but you guys have been teammates for a while now, right? If we'd told you only 2 can become Jinin, what would you have done? We'd figure out a way for all of us to be Jinin. Databayo, Naruto announced, standing and glaring at the Junin. We only got this far 'cause of each other. Exactly. We didn't think we should bother wasting time on a test you've been passing for 2 years. Your teamwork is the best out of all the Jinin teams already, some Chunin teams even. Genma shrugged, pushing away from the rails. So instead, we're going to see what you can really do, and then tomorrow, we'll start on missions and training. He began to walk casually down the stairs, but when no one followed, he turned. His 3 new genin were staring after him. So we pass? Whatever this second test was supposed to be? Kazuya insisted. Yeah. Now come on. Genma turned back and resumed walking, hearing the scrabble of footsteps behind him. Early the next morning, before they met up with the rest of the team, Naruto and Kazuya were summoned to a plain block of flats with Ryo in tow, the blonde still rubbing sleep from his eyes. Naruto felt the same way, and he knew his teammates would too. Genma-sensei really went all out yesterday, getting them to display every single skill and technique they had. Naruto knew his chakra supply was larger than most, but even he was drained by the end. Any idea why Hokage-sama would want us to come here? Kazuya inquired, staring up at the building. I think so, answered Naruto, beginning to climb the stairs to flat 9A. He ignored the rest of Kazuya's questions as he came to the flat door. It was slightly ajar, and Naruto pushed it open, hurting Ryo through the door. Gigi was waiting for them in the center of the room. It was a regular flat, a kitchen to their left, and a lounge straight in front, combining to form one large room. In the left wall there were 2 doors, and it was mirrored in the right. A large window occupied the back wall. Naruto could see that the closest door on the right was a bathroom. Gigi? Well done to you both on your graduation, Gigi congratulated. Youngest collective team to come out of the academy. Thank you, Hokage-sama, Kazuya beamed, bowing to him. Naruto, we made a deal. When you became a genin, you could move out of the orphanage. Gigi chuckled. I'll admit that I thought that it would be further in the future. Welcome to your new home. Naruto gaped at the room once again. What? Seriously? Yes. Since you are genin, you are ineligible for the orphan's allowance, but you'll receive it for Norio-chan. I've paid the first month's bills, but after that you will need to use the money earned during missions. Naruto let go of Ryo's hand and flew into the Hokage, hugging him tightly. Thank you, Gigi, he sobbed, smiling despite the tears. The Sandaime smiled down at him before looking at Kazuya. I knew of your intentions to move in with them. There are 3 rooms, and one of them will be yours. Kazuya was struck dumb. Hiruzen looked at the 3 boys, one still in his arms, one motionless in shock, and the last rubbing his eyes, confused. It was the least he could do for Minato's boys, and he knew that Kazuya was his closest family by this point. Naruto finally stepped back and wiped his eyes. He turned and kneeled beside Ryo, catching his attention. Hey, Sunshine. This is our new home. No more orphanage, and Kazumi is going to stay with us. He grinned, his cheeks glistening. Go and get your things. Sarutobi waved them off. I'll watch Ryo here until you return. He watched fondly as Kazuya finally shook himself out of it and proceeded to repeatedly thank and bow to him. Eventually Naruto managed to drag him out the door, but before they left, he called out on last time. "Your keys," he called, throwing a set to each genin. They caught them and grinned, waving goodbye to the Hokage. They managed to move their stuff in, but there was no time to organize it. The two older ones had to meet up with their team, and Ryo needed to be dropped off at the Inuzuka compound before that. Their stuff was dumped in the living room, ready to be sorted once they decided whose room was whose. Although the apartment was still new and unfamiliar, stuck onto the fridge was the card from Naruto's 6th birthday, the drawing of the three boys bright and cheery. The beginnings of a real home. Chapter 9. Teamwork means never suffering alone. The new team barely made it to the training ground they were to meet on time, Genma already waiting for them. At his raised eyebrow, Naruto quickly shot out an excuse. "We got lost on the road of life," he remembered Kashi saying that once, and it seemed to work. Genma's eyes widened slightly before he started laughing. "We had a late start and then had to drop Ryo-chan off," Kazuya filled in, looking at Naruto strangely. Genma waved them off. "You're on time. Now, today we're going to start with dodge training and then move on to new chakra control exercises. Finally, we're going to complete our first D rank," he declared, a smile still tugging his lips. He would need to speak with Kakashi at some point. "Dodge training?" Hana piped up. "I throw, you dodge," Genma replied, pointing to the border of tree at the edge of the training ground. "One of you, go and stand in front of the trees. You can't hide in them, and you have to last at least 5 minutes. You get hit, you start the 5 minutes over again." The three shared a look before Hana stepped forward, ordering the pups to stay back. "Guess I'll go first." She went over to the tree line and the two boys went to find a place with a good view. They plonked themselves down as their new sensei went to stand a good 20 meters from the oldest genin. An hour later, Hana staggered over to them, falling to the ground and attempting to catch her breath. Genma-sensei had used blunt kunai but put bright red paint on them, and Hana's whole outfit was covered in the stuff. "That was harder than I expected," she wheezed out, her dogs starting to swarm her. Naruto and Kazuya remained silent. It looked a lot harder than any of them expected. They knew that their sensei was holding back, but it didn't look like it at all. Some of them they hadn't even seen been thrown. "So who's next?" Genma chuckled, casually swinging a kunai by its hoop. Kazuya sighed heavily before standing, brushing off some dirt. "Let's do this." Another hour later, Kazuya collapsed next to his teammates. There was very little purple left on his shirt, and he had dozens of red splotches on his face. By now Hana had recovered, and she stared down at him in sympathy, glad for someone else to understand the pain of this exercise. "I thought I was fit, but fuck, that was a different kind of fit." "Come on, guys," goaded Genma, walking over. "You were only at it an hour. True, it requires a different kind of flexibility and movement compared to taijutsu, but it will be useful in the long run." His gaze landed on Naruto, and the redhead gulped, despite himself. Rising to his feet and tying his hair back, he walked over to the tree line, adjusting his brace. Turning to face the Junin, he grinned. "Bring it." Only half an hour later, Naruto went to stand next to his friends as they got to their feet. "Probably helps being half the target we are," Kazuya teased, looking over his mostly clean friend. "You're just jealous," Naruto shot back, smirking at the older boy. Hana rolled her eyes. "All right, so Naruto has the greatest speed and flexibility out of all of you, but he lacks power. You two are about average at the moment, so we'll do this 5 times a week at the start of training," Genma summarized. "Now, we'll move on to chakra control before lunch." He led them further into the field, the sound of a stream reaching their ears. Genma stopped next to the stream and pointed the trees nearby. "Kazuya, Hana, you'll be learning tree climbing. You know the basics, so I want you to get at least halfway up the tree in the next 3 hours," he said, throwing a couple of sharpened kunai at their feet. "Naruto, you'll be doing water walking and you should be able to take 5 steps without sinking by lunch. I'll be nearby if you need help." The trio nodded and left to do their tasks. Naruto shed his t-shirt and sandals, keeping his shorts and brace, having tried this a couple times before. He already knew he was going to have a very cold, very wet morning. The morning passed quickly as they focused on their exercises. There had been a few mishaps along the way, resulting in many bruises and sneezes. Kazuya had asked Naruto to demonstrate how it was done after he'd exploded a part of the tree from too much chakra, causing Naruto to startle and sink. The younger Genin readily agreed, eager to escape the water even for a short while. He had walked up and down slowly, talking through it until he stepped on one of the ruined parts. "Yeah, Shiranai Genma," he responded, following the pair into a general checkup room. He leaned against the wall beside the door as he just watched the interactions between the other two, storing his questions until they were done. He almost lost his grip on the senbon in his mouth when Naruto took the brace off, revealing the network of seal tattoos beneath it. Serious tattoos for a 7-year-old. Why hadn't he been told? All that was in his academy file was that his arm had been damaged in the attack, nothing about the seals. He'd have to see about getting a hold of the Genin's medical file. Genma kept his cool as the checkup proceeded, and it became obvious they had done this countless times. Was Naruto really medically fit to be in the field? He was only 7 after all. There was still time for him to wait to become a Genin. Plus, he had seen the condition that the boy was in that day. Of course, Genma had known about him when he was assigned the team, but there seemed to be a few missing pieces. He zoned back in as Naruto pulled his brace back on. "Well, Naruto-kun, your arm is in good condition, and even getting stronger. The seals are doing better than we expected. There are no signs of damage in your chest so far. It might not even become apparent for a few years. Your facial scar should start to fade soon, but as you already know, it'll always be visible to some degree," Yakushi-sensei announced, ruffling the boy's hair slightly. Naruto shot a bright grin at him and shouted a quick "see you tomorrow" at Genma before he flung himself out the door. The Junin waited a second before stepping forward, catching the doctor's attention. "Can I look at Naruto's medical file?" he asked, his usually calm, casual demeanor edged with tension. Yakushi looked him with a hint of understanding in his gaze. "That's confidential, but Hokage-sama knows the full story. It would be better if you asked him." Genma nodded curtly before striding out the door and through the exit, directly for the Hokage Tower. When he arrived, the Hokage's last appointment was leaving, and Genma let himself in. The old leader was at his desk, filling out some of the never-ending paperwork. "Hokage-sama," Genma saluted. "Genma-kun, what bring you here? Is the team all right?" the Sandaime inquired, hiding his surprise. "It's about Naruto." The Hokage nodded and placed down his brush, giving Genma his full attention. The Tokubetsu Junin was one of his calmest and most reliable shinobi, even if he did have a tendency to joke around. There was an air of tension around the shinobi, though, and his ever-present senbon was clenched in his teeth. I'd been told about his inability to use chakra in his left arm, and that he uses one-handed seals to account for that. However, I was not told about the seals on his arm, nor the potential damage to his chest. He has to have checkups every month. He's 7. Is he really ready to be a Genin? The Hokage was silent for a moment before speaking. Has anything happened in training or on missions to indicate he's not ready? No, he's performing well in both those respects, but he has a few years before the normal graduation age. He can spend them working on his health, Genma argued. While it is true that Naruto-kun has a disadvantage compared to other Genins, he passed that exam on his own merit. I cannot take away something that has been rightfully earned. The Hokage stated firmly. I believe he will surprise you. Hokage-sama, I saw him that day. He was hospitalized for 6 weeks. At Genma's words, the Sandaime frowned. Sighing, he turned to face out the window, gazing at the stone visage of his successor. I am sure you have pieced together Naruto-kun's true identity? Yes, Hokage-sama, but it can't be. Yondaime-sama never had a second child. Naruto was not a redhead, and he was supposed to have died when he went looking for his parents that night. I cannot share the whole story with you, but Naruto is every bit Minato and Kushina's child, so you know as well as I that nothing can stop him when he puts his mind to it. Yes, Hokage-sama, Genma sighed. Not only that, but the boy possesses a powerful sensing ability that will be invaluable in the future. We cannot afford for him not to become a shinobi, especially with the current war with Kumo. The old man smiled gently, turning back to Genma. That boy has been through so much already that I do not think anything could hold him back at this point. 2 weeks later and Team 7 had fallen into a routine. Turn up, get painted kunai thrown at them, either chakra control, taijutsu or genjutsu, lunch, D-rank mission, then teamwork exercises every other day. Sometimes hide and seek, Shinobi version. Hana was always the outright winner when she was it. Her clan was renowned for their tracking abilities for a reason. But Naruto held his own as he worked on expanding his sensing range. Kazuya hated those days. The Genin had warmed to their sensei, though they still relied on each other for help rather than asking him. Genma was content to let them work it out on their own. It was only for taijutsu he really took control of teaching. Naruto, Kazuya, and Ryo had also managed to finish moving into their new flat, but there were aspects of living alone that they had not fully considered. The Sandaime had sorted their bills for the first month at least, but the boys now knew there was far more to it than that. Naruto could only thank Kami-sama for their babysitting missions, as the advice they got from the mothers was proving invaluable. Kazuya had the laundry covered as he'd had to do it for his uncle, and Naruto picked it up easily. Chores were divided between them and ran smoothly after the first week. The real problem lay in cooking and groceries. Neither had had to cook their own meals, Kazuya being fed ready meals and such, while Naruto and Ryo had been fed by the orphanage. Starting out in their new home, the only meal they had mastered was instant ramen. It was the D ranks they had fetching groceries for busy mothers that saved them, the women more than happy to answer some of their questions. It was on one such mission that Naruto encountered a vaguely familiar face. Browsing the fruit and vegetables for his part of the list, he felt a knock against his leg and looked down to find a young, pale face. The child grabbed the onion on the ground and ran back to a woman nearby, the resemblance between the two unmistakable. She walked over to Naruto, the small boy trailing after her. Naruto noted the Uchiha symbols stitched into both of their clothing. "I'm sorry. Sasuke-chan wanted to help me with the shopping today, and the onion got away from him," she said with an amused lilt to her voice. "It's all right, Uchiha-san. Is that really Sasuke, though?" Naruto grinned, scratching the back of his neck sheepishly. Her brows rose in surprise. "You know him?" "Yeah, I met him a couple years ago at the park with Itachi. My brother and Sasuke were in the same sand pit," he explained. He would never forget the day he met the Uchiha prodigy. He maintained his smile for a moment before it dropped, his eyes widening. "I'm really sorry. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. I should have said that before." Quite all right, Naruto-kun. I should have done the same. I am Uchiha Mikoto," she responded in kind. Naruto looked down to see Sasuke still clutching the onion. He had really grown from that day in the park. Ryo had grown too, but he didn't really notice it when he saw him every day. It was only now he realized how much time had passed. It felt like he'd met the Uchiha siblings months instead of years ago. He noticed the boy looking towards a bright red stand. Mikoto picked up on his gaze and smiled down at her son, seeing what he had his eyes on. "He loves tomatoes," she laughed. "Every time he comes here, he manages to find that stall." Naruto smiled back, reminded of his brother's obsession with ramen. Of course, he wasn't much better. An idea sparked, and he excused himself for a moment, heading to the stand and rummaging his pockets for change. He and Kazuya were on a tight budget, since it was just them and the D ranks they could do, but he could spare this. He got his prize and turned back to the Uchiha, still where he had left them. He walked up to Sasuke and knelt in front of him, offering a ripe, red tomato. The little boy looked at him with wide eyes and glanced back at his mother. She nodded and gestured forward. Sasuke took the tomato from Naruto's hand, uttering a quiet "thank you," and immediately tucked in. Naruto stood and bid goodbye to the pair and continued gathering things from his list. In the little free time they had, Naruto and Kazuya still helped out at Tenjiro's shop, absorbing any knowledge imparted to them by the man. Along with deliveries, they helped him restock the shelves while Tenten and Ryo were with Tenten's mother. She had returned a few months after they started helping out, and was more than happy to take care of another child. It was one of these days Naruto came across a large blank roll of paper, Hey, Tenji-san, where's this go? He asked, looked at the roll curiously. That's fuinjutsu paper, so it goes with the ink, which is… Tenjiro trailed off, looking around. Fuinjutsu? Naruto repeated. I've heard of that. The Yondaime was famous for using it, Tenjiro said absently, still trying to track down the ink. Yondaime, huh? Naruto mumbled, staring down at the paper. His head snapped up as he came to a decision. Hey, have you got any books or scrolls that I can read? Tenjiro paused in his search and looked Naruto in the eye. Naruto shifted on his feet at the gaze. Are you sure? It's one of the most difficult skills to master. Yeah, I'm sure, Naruto replied, a small smile tugging at his lips. Tenjiro opened his mouth to reply when Kazuya's voice cut in. Tenji-san, can I borrow this? The brunette popped around from behind one of the shelves holding a green-covered book. Iryo Ninjutsu, Practical Techniques was the title. Naruto was surprised. Kazuya had never mentioned his interest in medical techniques before. Not that one, but I have something more your level, Tenjiro replied as he moved to a set of boxes they hadn't reached yet. Pulling out a set of 3 scrolls, he handed them to Kazuya, before moving to one of the back shelves to retrieve another couple, giving them to Naruto as he took the roll from him. Read them first before you try anything. If you can master the theory, the techniques themselves will come much easier, he explained. Can we really have these? Kazuya spoke up, wide-eyed. I think all your help these past 2 years is worth a scroll or 2, Tenjiro winked. As long as you two are happy to continue helping with the shop, I can give you materials to learn from. These first ones are for you to keep, but you can borrow any other books or scrolls when you need them. Just ask me first. There's the library too, which should have even more for you to read. Naruto exchanged an excited look with Kazuya. Thanks, Tenji-san, they echoed, setting their scrolls behind the counter and continuing their rolls with greater enthusiasm. They finished quickly and were soon sent on their way, Ryo following beside them as they headed for their flat, yawning the whole way. Naruto gripped his hand tighter as he looked to Kazuya. Why medical ninjutsu? You've never said anything about it before, he asked. It was the day you collapsed, he started quietly, his pink eyes dim. I can still see you on the ground, not moving, maybe even dying, and I can't do anything, just like then. You could have died right there and I wouldn't have been able to anything but watch. I never want to feel that way again. He looked at Naruto and Naruto saw the mess of emotions in his friend's eyes. He swallowed the hard lump in his throat and nodded, shooting his friend the most grateful smile he could give. Thanks, Kazuya. Why did you want the Fuinjutsu stuff? Our parents. Kazuya remained silent as Naruto glanced down at Ryo. My dad was amazing at it, and I feel like maybe if I learn it too, then you could feel closer to him. Even if he's gone, you don't have to lose all of him. Naruto's head snapped towards Kazuya, seeing a sad smile on his face. How'd you? My mom's favorite color was purple, Kazuya replied, twisting his shirt between his fingers. Naruto was silent long enough to get Kazuya's attention, and as the brunette turned to him, he saw a bright smile on his friend's face. I'm really happy I met you, Pinkubaka. Kazuya grinned back at him and ruffled Naruto's hair. Me too, Akachan. Naruto felt a tug on his trouser leg and looked down, seeing Ryo staring at them both intently. What's up, sunshine? Naruto smiled gently. The 4-year-old was silent, and for a moment Naruto's heart stopped, wondering if his brother had heard him mention their father. Thankfully, Ryo hadn't asked about their parents yet, but Naruto knew it was a matter of time. He would tell Ryo everything, but ideally he wanted to wait until Ryo was going into the academy. He couldn't lie if he was asked. He couldn't do that to Ryo. It was times like this he was acutely aware of the difference in their age. Despite it only being 3 years, Naruto felt as if those relatively few years stretched on forever, heaping a weight on his shoulders he still didn't know if he was ready for. Ryo seemed to decide on whatever was running through his head as he finally spoke. You and Kazumi are weird. Naruto was stunned before he began laughing, doubling over wheezing, attracting the confused stares of villagers heading home for dinner. Feeling a stitch in his side, Naruto sat down, grinning widely at his little brother. Kazuya stood beside him, a smile on his face. Yeah, we are, Naruto grinned, looking into his brother's beautiful violet eyes. so much like their mothers. He stood and brushed off his trousers, taking Ryo's hand again and following Kazuya home. Chapter 10. A C rank, they said. A simple mission, they said. I have excellent news. 3 groans greeted these words. Your definition of excellent is way different than ours, Genma-sensei, Kazuya whined, sitting up from his previous position of a collapsed heap. Yeah, last time you said that we spent 2 days fishing out garbage from one of the rivers, Naruto added from his place on the ground next to Kazuya. He hadn't bothered to sit up. That was an excellent training opportunity to test your chakra control. Genma grinned, savoring the annoyed looks of his genin. We stank for days after, Hana deadpanned. I had 4 showers that day alone. 4. And your water walking is all the better for it, Genma waved off their responses. Now, don't you want to know what kind of C rank you will be completing? 3 pairs of eyes bored into their sensei. You've been a team for 4 full months now, and your individual training has paid off massively. Your taijutsu and chakra control has improved, and you've all learned the E-rank jutsu I assigned. Hana, your clan techniques are coming along well, and while your medical ninjutsu and fuinjutsu are still in the beginning stages, Kazuya and Naruto, they have improved massively over the last 3 months. You're ready, finished Genma, looking over his students. Gradually, matching grins were reflected in the faces of his genin. Naruto jumped up and pumped his fist in the air. We're so ready, Databayo. What Akachan said, Kazuya added, rolling his eyes fondly. What's the mission? Hana asked, pups around her at attention. Well, you guys were specifically requested for this mission, and it's a simple one. We are to transport a metal shipment from Tetsuno-kuni back to Konoha for a shinobi supply shop run by Tenjiro. Minimal danger, however, there is always the threat of bandits, so our main capacity would be as guards. It will take us a week of travel to get to Tetsuno-kuni. It will take us at least another week to make it back once I seal the shipment, but prepare for 3 weeks and pack some warm clothes. We will cross directly from Hi-no-kuni to Tetsuno-kuni, so there shouldn't be any problems with foreign shinobi, but never let down your guard. Understood? Yes, sir. Meet at Konoha's entrance, ready to go in 2 hours. You should be wearing either green or black clothes. Genma took a moment to stare at Naruto and Kazuya. Dismissed. He disappeared, leaving only leaves and a faint breeze in his wake. Each of the genin took a moment to absorb the information before Naruto slapped a hand against his face. Ryo, Hana, do you think your mom would watch him for 3 weeks? Hana shrugged. Probably, but we can go ask now. The 3 took off towards the Inuzuka compound. Naruto bounced slightly in front of the gate, his backpack a comforting weight on his back. He would swear for the rest of his shinobi career that learning to craft storage seals first was the best decision he could have ever made. Kazuya stood beside him talking to Hana, but Naruto couldn't focus on what they were saying. Would Ryo be okay while he was gone? It was Naruto's first time leaving the village, and his brother would be alone. Not completely alone. He had Kiba and Sume, but would he really be okay without him there? He was fine during the time Naruto was in the hospital, but he could visit then. This time, there would be no contact until he stepped back into the village in 3 weeks. Maybe he wouldn't be bothered since Kashi disappeared all the time, but it was different this time, right? Naruto. His head snapped to Kazuya, the older genin looking at him in concern. Ryo will be fine, continued Kazuya, smiling gently. A heavy sigh left Naruto's body. Am I that predictable? He grinned ruefully. Only with Ryo. The rest of the time you're the most unpredictable guy I've ever met. Naruto was about to respond, but the arrival of Genma cut him off. All right, Team 7, you ready? The man smirked around his senbon. Leading the way, he signed them all out at the Konoha guard station. Naruto looked at the empty road ahead of them, and then back at his village. His first C rank. It felt it had taken both forever and no time at all to get here. Despite how far he'd come, Naruto knew he was lacking. He was the weakest when it came to taijutsu, bookwork, and ninjutsu. The only reason he had come this far was because of his friends. He also knew, without his sensing ability, he would never have been let into the academy in the first place. Despite knowing all this, Naruto couldn't help but feel proud. Even after everything with his chakra coils and struggling with things that came easy to his friends, he was here. He could do this. He had begun to focus less on pinpointing chakra and more on range and identification. He had now memorized over 10 chakra signatures and had pushed his maximum range out to a 100-meter radius, although he couldn't hold it for long. He wondered if his parents would be proud. Naruto made a mental note to buy Guy a bowl of ramen when they got back. If it wasn't for that schedule he made for him, Naruto doubted he'd have been able to keep up as well as he had. It was the third day, and Genma-sensei had announced they were crossing the border when they packed up camp. So far the mission hadn't been too bad. They ran through the trees for most of the day, rising at dawn and only stopping at sunset, then set up camp and a watch rotation during the night. Naruto hadn't been able to sense anyone near them since they left Konoha, but the closer they came to the edge of the forest, the stronger the signature he had felt only moments ago became. As Genma-sensei halted on a wide branch, holding up a fist, his team settled near him within the foliage. Naruto tried to curb his heavy breaths, his legs trembling slightly. Kunai or shuriken? Rice, Genma-sensei replied. The signature Naruto sensed dropped from the branches above, a Konoha headband wrapped around his right arm. Papers? Genma handed the documents over and Naruto shot a pained grin at Kazuya, the brunette staring at him in concern. C rank, huh? The shinobi asked, raising an eyebrow at them. He handed back the papers and walked a few steps up the trunk. Turning back, his hands moved through signs that looked like jutsu, but Naruto didn't recognize them. Genma-sensei nodded and held up his hand again, dropping it to point down. Naruto dropped down from the branches to stand next to Hana. Genma landed just in front of them without a sound, the documents already gone. Just past the tree line is Tetsuno Kuni. The country is covered in snow, but we shouldn't reach it for another couple of hours. On the way back, the question will be yes or no, and the reply is 3. Got it? There was a round of nods before Genma-sensei led the way onto foreign soil. Kazuya's first impression of Tetsuno Kuni was that it was cold. Fucking cold. Like seriously, it made winter in Konoha seem like a lovely spring day, and he vividly remembered freezing his ass off in his old room. The cloak he had brought kept out the snow and wind, but it was still going to take some getting used to. Especially the fact there was no trees. Kazuya had never left Konoha before, so the sight of the empty horizon surrounding them was the strangest thing he had ever seen. It was one thing to read about other countries in books. It was something entirely different to actually be there. The only thing for miles was the 3 wolves they were heading towards. Surrounded by an uneven, white landscape, he glanced back to see Naruto running behind him. They had had to adjust the technique slightly, but their tree walking could apparently be applied to snow, which meant they saved time trudging through it all. Still, it was the morning of the 6th day since they had left the village, and Kazuya was worried about how much longer his friend could go on for. He'd noticed in the trees, but the redhead had just kept going, so he'd stayed quiet. Since the hospital incident in the academy, Naruto's physical condition had improved massively, and the brace Tenji-san made for him was incredible. No matter how far Naruto had come, though, the memory of the younger boy swamped by the stark white sheets was never far from Kazuya's thoughts. Naruto was his first friend. They had spent 2 years working together to escape their shitty situations, and then he got Kazuya out completely by offering him a new home. It was more than he could have ever hoped for when he joined the academy. He'd lost the single most important person in his life when his mother had died. After years of misery, he'd found Naruto, and then he'd almost lost him too. No way was that going to happen again, not before the redhead had at least lived a good, relatively long life. There was Ryo to look after too, and Hana, and Tenji-san, and little Tenten, and Genma-sensei. Really, since that first class, the list just kept growing, and the gaping void left in his heart after his mother passed was filled piece by piece. He knew it would never really be whole, not truly. He had people to smile for now, though, and he needed to keep them safe. He would master medical jutsu so nothing like the incident or anything else would happen under his watch again. I can hear you thinking, Pinkubaka. Kazuya grinned at his friend. Is that so? Are we adding psychic to your sensing capabilities? His grin widened as he faced forwards once more, feeling Naruto's glare boring into his skull. I'm fine. And I'm delighted to hear that. Naruto grew quiet once more, and Kazuya could hear his breathing grow a bit louder. Up ahead, he saw Genma-sensei stop and turn to them. We're almost there, so instead of stopping to make camp, we're going to keep going. We should be there by tomorrow morning, he dictated loudly as the three genin huddled around him. Do you remember your academy lessons on Tetsu no Kuni? Kazuya could feel the misery coming from his friends without even needing to look at them. They have samurai, not shinobi, right? He spoke up, pulling his cloak tighter around him. Shinobi aren't supposed to do anything in Tetsu no Kuni, 'cause we don't have any pull here. Correct. We're only here to get that shipment on behalf of a Konoha merchant, so I'm gonna tell you guys now. Do not do anything to insult the samurai, don't get involved in anything, and don't do anything outside of the mission parameters. We go in, get a night of sleep, pick up the package, and we leave. Got it? Kazuya joined the round of nods before they set off again. He slotted in behind Naruto, keeping his friend in front as they continued towards their destination. Naruto dragged himself out the warmth of the inn, closing his eyes as the cold slammed into him. They had managed to make it to the village in the early hours of that morning, and Naruto didn't think he'd ever cherished a night's sleep more in his life. Genma-sensei had shot out a quick meet in front of the inn at dawn before Naruto had closed his eyes, dead to the world until he'd felt the shaking from Hana a few hours later. He was happy that they'd had the chance to go on C rank, but so far it had been very different than he thought it would be. Running around the village didn't prepare him for a whole week of traveling, and that was without taking the climate into consideration. He imagined missions outside the village to involve fighting, dashing rescues, destroying the landscape with powerful jutsu, like in the stories his parents told him back then about their missions. Now he thought about it. They must have traveled like this to get to those exciting parts, but he was struggling to adjust to even this much. He knew it would get easier with time and more missions, but for now, the misery weighed him down as he plonked himself beside Kazuya, shivering. Genma-sensei left earlier to get the stuff, Hana told him as she sat with her pups in her lap. Kazuya shot looks at the passing samurai. I know he said to pack warm clothes before we left, but somehow I don't think he considered that we live in the land of fire, the brunette grumbled. This is worse than our winters have ever been. He probably did, but there's not exactly much he could do. Hana sighed, her hands shoved in her armpits. We'll warm back up when we start running. Naruto didn't bother holding back his groan at the thought of doing this all again, but in the opposite direction. On the bright side, they'd be running towards warmth and ramen. His head snapped up as he felt Genma-sensei come into range. Kazuya noticed and stood, brushing off the excess snow. Naruto and Hana joined him, bouncing in place. Their sensei came into view shortly after, unbothered by the snow swirling around him and Senbon firmly in place. Didn't cause any trouble while I was away? He grinned. Too cold to cause trouble, muttered Kazuya under his breath, securing his bag. Are all C ranks like this? Naruto piped up. Genma-sensei shrugged before beckoning them to follow him out of the village. Most are pickup or delivery. Sometimes it might be guarding missions for clients as they travel between countries. So it's mostly running from place to place? Pretty much, Genma-sensei nodded. It's good practice for higher-level missions, since all missions require traveling to one extent or another. Difference is with the higher-level ones, is that you have to actually carry out objectives that require skill and stamina after the traveling part. Naruto turned this over in his head as Genma-sensei handed their papers to the samurai guards at the village gates. It made sense, and at least with the next C rank, they would know what to expect. He should still probably ask Guy for a stricter training menu, though. They were allowed through the gates, and their pace began to pick back up. A few days later, Team 7 had left the snow behind and was coming up to the samurai bridges. Built of blue stone over a steep drop, it was large and sturdy, and Naruto couldn't help but admire it. As he peered into the short distance to get a better look, something flickered at the edge of his chakra sense. His steps slowed as he focused on the signature that had appeared on the other side of the bridge. Genma-sensei, he called as weaker signatures joined the first. His team stopped and backtracked to join him. Kazuya started to look around, recognizing whatever was showing on his face. Naruto? Genma-sensei prompted after a moment. There's someone on the other side of the bridge. They've got a bunch of others with them. Genma's stance straightened as he took the senbon out of his mouth. Can you sense how many? How are they moving? 10. They aren't moving. It's like they're waiting for something. An ambush, Genma-sensei nodded. Probably bandits. They're common on C ranks, and it's their favored tactic. Naruto shifted on his feet and checked his weapons pouch, Kazuya and Hana doing the same. It's good that we got early warning. I want to leave this mostly to you, to get some real combat experience. I'll step in if any of you need help, but you have to be prepared to do what's necessary. Genma-sensei met each of their eyes separately, the message clear in his gaze. Naruto knew he'd have to kill at some point, but now the moment was here, he wasn't sure how he felt about it. Bandits don't usually use chakra, so you should have no issues, he continued. I'll follow behind you on the bridge. Hana, you'll be at the front since you are the strongest in practical combat. Kazuya, you'll follow her, and Naruto, keep your teammates up to date on the enemy's numbers and position. Okay? The three shot out a quick yes sir as they got into position. Naruto breathed deeply as he watched Kazuya follow Hana towards the bridge. He could hear his heart in his ears as if it had jumped into his throat. He'd trained for this. He could do this. They'd be fine. Hana took her first step on the bridge, her hackles raised to match her dog's. Naruto watched Kazuya shift his kunai in his pouch, palming one of his own. The chakra signatures he felt barely moved as they reached the middle of the bridge, and Naruto focused on the biggest. It felt so different than the others, almost like Genma-sensei's. Something clicked as the chakra signature shot forward. It's a shinobi! He screamed as a ball of fire shot towards Hana. Hana desperately threw herself to the side and the ball struck where she had stood. No attack followed, and Naruto's gaze was drawn to the man at the end of the bridge. He stood tall, with short green hair obscuring his eyes. He wore a blue and orange jacket that clashed with the wooded background, and he'd folded his arms. A headband with a scored-out arrow was wrapped around his left arm, and Naruto had no idea which village that was meant to be. A little genin team from Konoha, huh? The man spoke. Picking up some goodies from the samurai, were we? Naruto felt the other signatures approach the bridge, and the other bandits came into view through the tree line. He felt Genma-sensei pass him, going to stand in front of Hana. Suika, missing nin of Takigakure. B rank in the bingo book, he stated, as Hana scrambled back to stand beside Kazuya. The man's face twisted into a smirk, his black eyes becoming visible as he tilted his head. Now this doesn't have to get ugly, he sneered. Hand over whatever you got from the samurai, and any coin on you, and we'll let you go on your merry way. Naruto, is he the only shinobi? Genma-sensei asked, keeping his eyes on the missing nin. Yeah. Naruto tried not to flinch at the sharp look from Suika. A censor, he mused. Don't get many of them nowadays. I'll handle him. You guys get the rest, Genma-sensei ordered, his hands already flipping through rapid seals. As he unleashed a wave of water, pushing Suika off the bridge and away from the trees, he shot forward, following the jutsu with several thrown kunai. Naruto tore his gaze from his sensei, and he ran with his teammates towards the tree line. What? Are they letting babies do their missions now? He overheard as they drew close. At the corner of his vision, he saw Kazuya embed a shuriken in the neck of one of the bandits. He felt a flicker to his left and ducked beneath the swing of a bandit's dagger, planting his kunai deep into the woman's thigh and feeling the muscle give way. As she dropped to one knee, gripping the limb, Naruto yanked the weapon back out and plunged it into her eye. There was less resistance than there had been in her leg. Her scream was cut off, the blood spraying Naruto's face as he desperately pulled it out once again. He heard a man's roar behind and barely dove to the side quick enough to avoid the blade of an axe. Naruto stared up into the bearded man's snarl, his beady eyes bright with rage. His heart almost beat out of chest, and he fumbled through the seals as the axe came down once again, swapping with the woman's corpse. He swallowed heavily when her guts stuck to the axe, as the man prepared for another swing at him. He flung a shuriken, grimacing as it missed the neck and stuck into the man's shoulder. He swore heavily as another bandit came at him from the side, wielding a rusty katana. Naruto held his breath and ducked between his legs, using his bloody kunai to slash upwards. The bandit howled and dropped the katana to grip the wound. Naruto took his chance. He shoved his bloody kunai back into his pouch and grabbed the katana, needing both hands to get a firm grip. The axe guy was still trying to get a good swing in, and as Naruto got the katana stuck in the back of the other bandit's neck, the axe left a shallow cut on his right side as he barely moved away in time. He abandoned the weapon and rolled away, trying to ignore the sharp pain at the movement. As he scrambled to stand, the axe bandit dropped to his knees with a roar, and Naruto could see Kazuya extracting his kunai from the man's heels. Naruto leapt forward, yelling as he shoved the kunai deep into his neck. He let go, leaving the weapon to stick out of the bandit as he slumped to the ground with a quiet gurgle. He could sense no more around him as he scanned the bodies scattered around him. Kazuya was wiping off his kunai as Hana checked over the pups. Naruto's mind raced as his gaze swept over the bandits. All dead. He did that. He killed at least 3 of them. He did this. A sharp yell cut into his downward spiral as his eyes snapped over to where he could now only feel one chakra signature. Genma-sensei stood above the missing nin, the edges of his clothes singed and the earth around him disturbed and uneven. "Any injuries?" he called out, turning to face his genin. "Yeah," Kazuya answered, holding a bleeding arm. "Okay, Naruto, can you sense anyone else around?" Naruto shook his head. He couldn't trust that he'd keep his stomach down if he spoke. "Go and wait just beyond the tree line. I'll join you once I've dealt with this." Naruto nodded but didn't move, going back to stare at the bodies. He felt hand on his shoulder and a fluffy nose on his cheek. He wasn't sure when he'd sat down. He let Hana help him up, and they limped into the trees. They'd traveled a short distance away from the bridge once Genma-sensei joined them, but they couldn't go far. Naruto had lost the battle with his stomach somewhere along the way. As they sat around the small fire, wounds treated, the genin couldn't bring themselves to speak. "You guys did well." Naruto didn't look at his sensei, only staring at his hands. "My first kill happened when I was a genin, too." This brought Naruto's eyes up. "It was my 3rd mission outside the village. We had to bring supplies to the border, and this was around the time of the 3rd Shinobi War, so everyone was on high alert," his sensei smiled sadly. "Some bandits thought we would be easy targets, and so they tried to get our cargo. Most of them weren't that old either. The first one I killed looked only a couple of years older than me." Naruto's throat closed up. "Death is a way of life for us," Genma continued quietly. "It's you or them. That choice isn't easy, but you have to keep in mind why you became a shinobi in the first place." Ryo's face flashed through Naruto's head, his smile bright and eyes sparkling. Would he kill for his brother? His friends? His gut said yes without hesitation. Naruto straightened up, wiping his face and looking at the blood mixed in with the tears. "At the end of the day, you are protecting something. You need to remember what that is. What is worth another person's life to you?" "My family," Hana whispered. "My home," Kazuya added. "My brother." Genma smiled. "Good, remember that and you'll be fine." Naruto nodded and accepted the bread handed to him, pausing before taking a bite. It sank slowly to his stomach, but it stayed there. The genin dragged their feet towards the Inuzuka compound after their visit to the hospital. Naruto didn't think he would ever be so happy to see the village gates in his lifetime. Once they had reported to the mission assignment desk, Genma had firmly guided them to the hospital. Turned out facing a B-rank missing nin bumped up the difficulty from a C to a B rank. Naruto wasn't sure it really counted, since their Junin sensei was the one to actually deal with him while they just had the bandits. The extra pay couldn't hurt, though. They also hadn't looked like they had lived through a B-rank mission, having washed off the evidence of the fight on their way back to Konoha. Apparently, they still looked bad enough to draw some pitying stares from the adults they ran into in the village. It had been a quiet journey, as each of the genin had sorted through their feelings. What Genma-sensei had said had struck a chord, but Naruto didn't think he'd ever get comfortable taking someone else's life. Maybe that was a good thing. The sounds from the compound reached their ears, and Naruto searched for that familiar chakra signature, trying not to crumple as he locked onto it. Finally, the inside of the compound came into view, and Naruto spotted the flash of blonde within the brown. "Rio!" The blonde head turned to him, and after an excited "me-san," Naruto dropped to his knees, hugging his brother tightly. He could feel the warmth from Ryo's small body, his hands gripping Naruto's black shirt. He could feel Kazuya shuffling beside him as Hana shot towards her mother. Naruto reached a hand out and dragged Kazuya into the hug. As he sat there, warm and surrounded by friends with his brother in his arms, Naruto understood what Genma-sensei had been trying to say. This is what he wanted to protect. This was worth killing for. This was worth dying for. Thank you for watching part 2 of What If Naruto Parents Died and Naruto Becomes Shinobi to Protect His Brother. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Anime T23 for more exciting what-if scenarios and anime content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next episode.